waterborne mobility, multimodality by any means. It's a topic by this plenary session, and I welcome you all, ladies and gentlemen. And I hope you will not sleep in the back, because I'm very good in activating you all as well, and you will see later. We have 4 excellent panelists, but before we leave the word to the excellent panelists, I will give the floor to Mr. Gerard Reuters from the DG MOVE European Commission. We welcome Gerard Reuters. The floor is yours. And an applause.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And multimodality is a theme which is quite close to my heart. I think perhaps to all of us, because we are, I guess, all of us dreaming about a very smooth and seamless interoperability and multimodality in our lives, so that we would be traveling easily. And it says by all means, or it said by all means, no, you see. But it's not so easy. It's not so easy at all. First of all, perhaps to start with, what is multimodality? Multimodality is when we are using 2 or more transport modes in a trajectory that we want to do. And it is not only for ourselves, for passengers, but also for goods. We need to look at the 2 dimensions. And they are realized very often in daily life for all of us as commuters. When we are in our city and we would like to go to work or to a meeting, it can happen quite often that you take a train and then you still do a last mile by a bike or by whatever kind of shared transport means. It's also realized very often on the national level, when you go to visit your family or when you have a business meeting somewhere else in your country. And it is also done in international and European level. When you are traveling to another country, like here, you come to the conference here in Lisbon, and you are traveling from Brno, like I said yesterday in my opening remark, and you have to combine a train to Stuttgart or to Prague airport and then fly. And that is, of course, multimodality on the physical side. And I also would like to talk about multimodality on the digital side, because as a passenger you would like to get easy access to tickets, and at least already to the information, how you could get there. So it is something that is both physical and digital. And very often the 2 themes are not there at all. I mean, we are trying to realize that since decades, but we are not really looking to get there. If I look on the physical side, we are very often not having transport infrastructure that is, I would say, leading to easy multimodality. Let me take the example of Lisbon, here, this city. The airport and the main station, Oriente, are not really, let's say, integrated very closely. There is quite a trajectory in between, and if you are with the family or with your suitcase, then you have to walk quite a bit. And you may perhaps then think, I'd rather take a taxi. Or I come with my personal car and I park it at the airport. If I take the example of a very costly investment, and if you were involved, Tour Bordeaux, we invested, I think, some 8-something billions in that high-speed rail project to gain a very good connectivity between the 2 cities. Then you arrive in Gare de Montparnasse, you arrive at the station, and you have to walk about 25 minutes to get to the metro. So all the time that we won by putting 8 billion into this high-speed line is lost in the last mile connectivity to connect to the metro line. So we have plenty of things still to do on the physical infrastructure. We have also still plenty of things to do when we look at the digital side. Because very often you don't find the information at all how you could be connecting multimodally. You may find quite easily the information on all kinds of air tickets, on plenty of websites, but you will not so easily find them for rail. I just wanted to go to a place called Nancy in France, because I had been studying there quite a number of years ago, and I simply didn't find the connectivity at all in any website. In fact, I just got a very expensive offer by high-speed rail from Brussels to Paris, then Paris to Nancy, but the cheap offer with the CFL, for those who know, those specialists who know in the room, the Luxembourg railways, was not found on any of these sites, whether they were MDMS sites or any rail sites. So we are quite far away from this. What are we going to do about that, or what perhaps do we need to do about it, and what I would like you to discuss, and the panel to discuss about that. First of all, the Commission has proposed a new legislation on the TEN-T. This is this physical infrastructure side. And for the first time, I explained it yesterday also a little bit, we have been inserting the dimension of urban nodes or cities. All the 424 that have 100,000 inhabitants or more. They will need to have, each of them, a sustainable urban mobility plan, which will also include a sustainable urban logistics plan, soon and soon. Because we want all of these nodes to have a passenger hub and a freight hub. We are still at the beginning of that work, because we have been discussing for some decades in a very friendly and kind way about the best practices that cities have, but now there comes an obligation. And we want all these cities to perform to that obligation, of course. And this will take time. We will have to work together to define what exactly is such a passenger hub. How can the passenger hub be organized? Not like I was just explaining in Gare de Montparnasse, where you have 25 minutes to transit from the one to the other, but rather by combining closely together the different transport modes, so that the multimodality that we are going to talk about is smooth and seamless. And that we also, from our side, for instance, could be co-funding multimodality in urban nodes, in such passenger hubs. And we also need to think about the freight hubs. How is it possible that in Europe, over the past decades, we have not seen much more shift to the environmentally friendly modes like rail or inland waterways? Because when the freight is arriving in our main ports all across our continent, because we have sea sites on all the sides of the continent, then there is not enough terminal capacity in the hinterland. So what I would like to see, if these goods come from China or from America and they land in Le Havre or in Hamburg or in whatever, Trieste or anywhere else, that they would then have the possibility to be transported very smoothly, multimodally, from maritime into rail to a hinterland connection, close to these 424 cities, and then be distributed. So you would have immediately a distribution over 3 modes, multimodally, very swiftly, with FT being in place. So this is a true change that we are doing with the TEN-T. Urban nodes have been inserted for that, and we have been reinforcing also the connectivity between these points, so between the ports, the airports, the terminals, and the urban nodes. That is absolutely what is needed on the physical side with this urban mobility policy and the TEN-T policy. But then we need, of course, to make it smart, and that's what this Congress is about. And there, data are really essential. Data that are reliable, that have high quality, that would also allow easy access to them, which are in the end and also fair and reasonable and non-discriminatory, as we often speak about. And this is not such an easy thing as I'm saying it now. We have been proposing from the Commission side an ITS overhaul, and I can share that here in this room because it's publicly known that the Member States have clearly rebutted this proposal so far by kicking out all of the mandatory data in the annexes and the timelines. So we made an ambitious proposal and we are back to square zero. Now we are gaining back traction together with the Nordic Swedish presidency, who is clever enough to go about it a second time and to reconsider how we could get, again, those kind of obligations into a text in order to get at least these minimum sets of data available. I said it yesterday as well in the opening, we do not want, as under the current ITS directive, that it are only the data that are available which should be made available through the national access points. We want a certain number of sets which we think are essential that have to be made available through the national access points. Because otherwise we will always remain with a situation which is very scattered, that from some member states and from some authorities we do have the data and from others not. And then those who are in this community here, who are providing the apps and who are providing the smartness, will always be confronted with a very difficult situation in Europe of having data or not having data. So ITS, we hope to conclude with the Swedes under the presidency now ongoing, we hope very, very soon, sooner than you may think. Building on that, we would like also to improve the other tools that are key in order to make those steps. In particular, the MMTIS, which is essential for having not only static data, but also dynamic data. Dynamic data that citizens need to know whether their train is delayed, whether their plane is on time, whether you have a good connectivity in this hub or not. MMT's proposal will address that, and is in fact ready for adoption by the Commission, so it will be there very soon. MDMS, the Multimodal Digital Mobility Services, is the other piece of the puzzle that we would like to propose. And here it is, of course, on what I was saying before, the availability for the passenger to find these data on those kind of platforms, MDMS platforms. And I know that this is going to be a very difficult proposal to negotiate, because there are a lot of vested interests all around, from operators and from MDMS platforms, to share these data. And this is what is, in fact, the discussion about. And this is also why I'm so keen to speak to this community, because I am asking you here, and also concluding by that, your support. Because if we are not having the support from this community, it might be extremely difficult to get this proposal through. Because I expect that from the air or the rail side, and sometimes even from the MDMS side, even if they are here amongst us, that there will be quite a bit of opposition to the proposal in order to get MDMS into a reality. I expect that these discussions will range for a long time, and I hope those discussions that we will have will lead to a good debate amongst you and with the room, because I think that this is the dimension in multimodality that is keenly missing. So that we are not talking only about what is missing in physical infrastructure, but also what is missing on the digital ITS side. I hope that this will see the light as soon as possible, and that we will have then a future where indeed it would be, as the title said, very easy to travel multimodally over the different modes, even if it will be quite a fight that I'm expecting. I'm not hiding that from my side, that I think that this will be one of the most difficult files that I will have been seeing through, much more difficult in fact than TEN-T and others. I wish you a very good debate, and have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Harold, for those wise words, and also for that push that we indeed shall take with us, because you probably also heard that it was a kind of a plea for us to actually work with this amongst us. Being a Nordic person, I jumped into the kind of a job immediately. My name is Jenny Simonsen, for information as well. I should introduce myself. So I will be moderating this session with these key panelists that we will have on stage soon. They will then introduce themselves by having a 3-minute kind of a key plea, or also pushing the thematic approach. We will then have some discussions, and I will also ask you to join into the discussion if you have questions. We have 2 hostesses in the room that will also have the microphone, so please wait for that and raise your hand if you have something that you would like to ask, or even comment. I think that's equally important. On that note, I would like to introduce first, and we applaud them all on the stage so that you also keep awake. I will applaud Mr. Miroslav Haltov, first on the stage. Please welcome. Please. Mr. Angelos Amditis, please. Welcome. Before I will ask you, Miroslav Haltov, to start, I would actually like to know how multimodal we are in this audience. So I presume when I say first road, and working with road, I will have more hands. So let's start with the air section. Do we have anyone? Excellent. 3, 4, 5. Good. The maritime sector. All right. We're not alone, so that's good. The rail. right? A little bit more. And then I presume if I say road, most of you will lift their hands. And the ones that you don't know, well, I can't help you. So you need to find out. All right. Thank you so much. And Mr. Miroslav, please.
Thank you very much for this introduction. I will then tell you something more about myself and the sector I'm representing in rail. I have been working for rail sector more than 40 years. It's quite a long time, in which I can really tell that rail came through the significant transformation in the last 40 years. I started working as an onboard staff on rail. You could meet me as a conductor, checking tickets. Not at the first period multimodal tickets, only rail. Then I came to the station, working as a station master, train dispatcher, timetable compiler, technology master, then to international affairs on the general management of Czechoslovak state railways and the Czech railways, after splitting Czech Republic into two parts, Czech Republic and Slovakia. And of course, it was a very big change when the so-called Iron Curtain fell. Because in previous times, the railway was divided. There were two railway systems, very differently working in operation, in strategies, in concepts, and so on. And later on, I continued working on IT systems, telematics, interoperability, and now research innovation, especially digitalization, automation, and also artificial intelligence, promoting that new technology. To the railway sector, I would like to underline that railway is the most environmentally friendly sector, having only 0.5% of greenhouse gases pollutions. So it's extremely green transport mode. But even that, we don't want to stay and looking around, we are looking forward. We need to focus on also new low-emission technologies like batteries, hydrogen, or synthetic fuels based on the chemical development in the chemical industry, and electrification. Connecting to that, the rail system is working on the automation. We are now in testing the automated train operation, driverless trains with the drivers, so it's revolution in the rail system, and of course digitalization and new technologies related to increasing capacity of the network, as Mr. Reuters already mentioned, and density networks is very, very important. And multimodality is a key aspect. And not only that, multimodality is not the end. We need to cooperate with other modes of transport, because the challenge for railway is going through cooperation to competitiveness. And that is about, I would like then later to explain my role in Europe's rail joint undertaking, the research innovation program of the European Commission. So thank you for your hearing, and I hope you will have the questions later on my expertise. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Haltov. We will for sure have questions. Thank you for that introduction. Mr. Caetano, please.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. So I was asked to address this plenary section first by discussion regulatory or policy barriers for multimodality. Let me start by saying that most of our mobility needs don't need multimodality. And that may be why it's so difficult to integrate the different modes of transport. Because they are designed from scratch to answer specific needs. And they have their own infrastructure and their own service modes. Now let me tell you that, if I tell you that the best station at the bakery is just 1.5 kilometers away from here, we just walk there. We don't need intelligent transport systems. We just need information that the best station are just 1.5 kilometers away. But if you are more than 3 or 4 or 5 kilometers away from the line, then maybe you better use road means of transportation. You are not going to use air, you are going to use road. And you asked what different modes of transport people were using, and in fact, the majority said road, but within the road ecosystem, there are many different modes. So you have multimodality within the road model also, which is the big challenge for urban mobility and the mobility as a service, as Harold was mentioning. So right now, what I think we have is a very fragmented ecosystem of transportation, of transport modes. In terms of legislation, we have this legacy of legislation that regulates the different modes, and that has to be somehow updated to accommodate the challenge of multimodality, of intermodality, of mobility as a service. That is the big challenge we have ahead. But in order to do that, public administration in Portugal and across Europe has to be more capable of following the technological challenges that we have had, to integrate those technologies challenges within the legislation. We are used to develop these legal frameworks using the legal departments of public administration. We have to have an internal dialogue between the legal departments and the engineering departments. We cannot rely only on input from the private sector, because there are some interests also there. So we have to somehow be able to promote that discussion within the public administration, within the European Commission, within these public institutions, to produce legislation that is more adequate for the challenge that we have ahead. Now, this is also difficult because, as I said, the market is very fragmented. Rail has its own culture, it has its own organization legacy, and multimodality requires that we cooperate, that we share experiences, that we share visions, and that requires that we change the way that each mode of transportation operates within the ecosystem of mobility. And that is a big challenge, and that's why also these events like these are important, so that we can have a dialogue among ourselves to discuss best ways to integrate the different modes of transport into a single ecosystem. Because as long as people look outside and see 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 different ecosystems of mobility, they will use one. They have to look at the different mobility services as an integrated mobility service. Going from A to B, I may have many different options, and that has to be embedded in my option. We tend to choose one, and usually what you choose is our private car, right? So policies have also somehow to stimulate or penalize the use of the private car within city limits. So I think this is what I wanted to say, just like in my starting position. The fighting fragmentation is very difficult, and that is the big challenge. Fragmentation is there. It has been there since day one. There are many vested interests that are the result of these different modes that were evolved differently in the past, and now the challenge is to have this sort of dialogue, constant dialogue between the different modes of transport, between the legal departments, the engineers, and have a new framework that can allow us to stimulate multimodality, intermodality. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We will come back to that fragmented part as well. So, Ambitis, please.
Thank you very much. Being the proud chairman of Vertical, and also coming from a research academic environment, multimodality is really nice in my heart. So I really believe on that. I think it's much bigger than mass or any other things that we are discussing here. So I think we'll come out from this discussion. Also, my colleagues mentioned a few of the things. But thinking about multimodality, I was thinking when I was coming to this session, actually, my multimodal journey coming here. Okay? Starting with a metro at my country, then reaching the airport, then flight, then using one of these taxi applications to come to my hotel, then tram here. So that was really a very good example of where multimodality is today. And there one could easily find all the difficulties, the fragmentation mentioned before, the difficulties on ticketing, the difficulties on having different platforms that you need to consult in order to arrange your travel, the lack of a smooth and transparent journey from end to end, all the liability if something goes wrong with part of your journey. So a number of different obstacles, if you like, or different difficulties, including the multiple platforms and operating systems that are out there, and that really doesn't make this whole experience an easy one. One of my hearts actually has to do with the public transport. So I'm the vice chairman of public transport in Athens, in Greece. This is a 4.5 million citizens city. And there we have, of course, all the road multimodality modes, as you mentioned before. So buses, metro, tram, everything. And for the last few years, we are discussing what multimodality means for public transport and how we could really go ahead with that. And there you will see all the difficulties I mentioned before, but also the lack of modality, the lack of the right incentives for people that are leading and managing these modes to go beyond that and to invest in interconnecting all these systems and to do the step forward. And this is one of the major problems. This has to do with training people, with making people understand the benefits and why they need to move forward, but also to invest. And this is one of the biggest things here. Intermodality, multimodality, interconnection of the different modes means a lot of financing, a lot of investment. And this is one of the main obstacles around the need for multimodality. So you need to do additional investments, you need to create your physical and digital and operational infrastructure. And this means money, and it means also costs and in maintenance and in continuing this whole infrastructure. And one thing that we also forget usually is when we speak about multimodality, it's not just people, it's also freight, goods. So we need also multimodality in transferring our goods. And all these crises we have lived the last few years show exactly the need to have a very flexible, very multimodal system for transporting our goods end-to-end. And this gives other challenges and other issues that we need to take into account. At the end of the day, interconnecting different modes, it's much more than just mass, which is more about ticketing and some other of the aspects that we are discussing here. So in Vertical and in the institute I'm working, we have introduced a term a few years ago that we called it Internet of Mobility. Why? Because at the end of the day, to achieve that, you really need mobility networks, and you need to find ways to manage these mobility networks and to make them work, to make them operate. And these type of terms, Internet of Mobility, makes people understand easier what we're talking about here, and they need to make all these things part of a network, and how we can really make them work together. So, closing my statement, I mentioned already about the issues we see. The financing, which is a major pillar of what we are discussing here, the infrastructure, which is the other thing that we really need, and not all people really understand the difficulty in this area. A lot of us underestimate the need for infrastructure, for investments, for all these type of things. The technology as a main pillar to overcome many of these issues, not all, but many. And technology, I hear many people say technology is here. Yes, but no. You still need to do a lot of things. There's still a lot of investments also in technology. The Commission and member states help a lot on that, but it's not enough. Technology is a continuous thing that changes, evolving, and changes the way we see things at the end of the day. And final point, last but not least, policy making. And Gerard mentioned that a little bit in his introductory comments. This is one of the most important pillars of multimodality. But allow me to claim that we need policy making that removes and not adds obstacles. And there are areas where policymakers need to be less aggressive, let's say, allow things to evolve, allow things to be provided by the stakeholders. But there are also other areas where the policymakers need to step in and need to be more aggressive. And by aggressive, I want to use the term, by aggressive means they need to come in and really, sometimes we need to have someone to force on us the measures that we need to take to move on and to make a step forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Mr. Andritis. Mrs. Brandtzeg, yes, welcome. Your statement.
Thank you, Yannick. And thank you to you, Harald, for an interesting keynote, which gives us a good basis for our discussion and pointing out the importance of collaboration and the need of sharing lessons learned from the different development processes within the different transport modes. As Yannick said, I have my work in Norwegian Public Roads Administration as Director of Department of Legislation and Regulatory Authority. And it might be some kind of a fun fact that I'm an educated landscape architect working with all these law questions. My colleagues up here have already addressed interesting and important perspectives. But as a starting point, I want to underline that we all have a great responsibility in making the transport sector green and to secure that we have a mixture of transport available that give all customers of transport the ability to choose transport that has a high bearing capacity, as high bearing capacity as possible, both for freight and persons, as we have already talked about. A lot of people here coming from the road sector, and we like to say that the roads are like the blood vessels in our bodies. We need them in our entire body or close to everywhere in our countries where people live or any kind of production take place. Of course, it's a lot of problems connected to the cities and the development and the traffic situation in the cities, but people live all over our countries. And the strength of our roads are that they can be used for so many types of transport. They are some kind of having in a multimodality in themselves, both public and private. They can be used by foot and by heavy vehicles. So it's a multimodal system structure being there. I am a bit interested in freight transport, and in Norway, just to say something about the problem or the things that has to be solved, 90% of the volume of the freight transport on land goes on road. And when you count this as money or value, the number is 97%. So the roads are very, very essential for the transport system in at least our country. So far, the railway system has had the advantages as low-emission transport, as mentioned. But now, as road transport becomes more and more emission-free, this advantage is reduced, or could be looked upon as reduced. Electrification is one possible technology. And in Norway, again, an example from my own country, the new cars sold in March, the market share of electric cars were 86%. So something is happening. When this is said, the transport sector is facing huge challenges. We are the ones, we in this room and all the other ones in the transport sector, that are expected to take a big share of the needed CO2 brought down, and time is running out. Automation and digitalization are tools we use. The sector is more and more data-driven. And it's important when we work with these data that we are able to see both the geographical information, the ITS information, and the building information models together. There's a lot of work to be done with standardizations from the different fields, and so it could be possible to use data from the different silos. But I do not think technology alone will solve our challenges. We have to work closer together. We have to overcome sector thinking, and that might be the biggest challenge. For what matters for the customer, a person or a package, is predictability. The issue is to reach our destination safe and on expected time. And if we put the customer in the center and take it from there, we might find some very interesting solutions. So thank you so far.
Thank you very much. When you now listen to these fantastic 4 introductions from our expert panelists, I hope you have thought about what they've said, and maybe you have some questions or comments, because as I said, I will not point at you, so don't be afraid about that, but I encourage you to actually participate. But I'll start with you, Mr. Haltuf. Also thinking about the culture that Mr. Anditis mentioned, and also a little bit what Mr. Reuters said about the infrastructure. How should then Europe's rail collaborate more or differently with other transportation sectors to enhance the multimodality aspect and provide efficient and sustainable transport?
Thank you for this question. First of all, I would like to stress that Europe's rail is not the association of railway undertakings or infrastructure managers or other authorities. Europe's rail is the research and innovation program for building new railway system. And I am focusing on the word system. Railway is a system of systems. It's not very easy to understand how railway is working. And for those who are not very familiar with railway, I would like first to introduce the Europe's rail in structure. Europe's rail is the partnership with the Horizon Europe program of research and innovation. And it consists of 2 main pillars, system pillar and innovation pillar. In the system pillar, we are focusing on building the system based on interoperability, multimodality, and accessibility on each part of the system. It means operation, infrastructure, data, exchange of data, sharing data, availability, accessibility, and so on, and also passenger and freight, not only one of them. The innovation pillar is prepared to fulfill the needs and requests of the system pillar. So it means in the innovation pillar we are building the project proposals, how to develop the rail system more efficient, more capable, with higher capacity and also a higher speed. And very much focusing on the customers, so customer-centric. In these pillars, we are building 6 basic flagship areas in which we are focusing on different parts of research and innovation. I will read, sorry for that, but it's necessary to write wording in these flagship areas. Flagship area 1 is focused on mobility management, multimodal environment, and digital enablers. You can see that multimodality is there in the name of this flagship area. Flagship area 2 is rail to digital automated up to autonomous train operations, so automation and digitalization. Flagship 3 is holistic and integrated asset management for Europe's rail system. Very important topic because this rail system is very complicated and we need to focus on each part of the system. Flagship area 4 is the sustainable and green rail system. It means we are focusing on the greening the transport rail, especially even we are now very, very environmentally friendly. Flagship area 5 is the transforming Europe's rail freight. This is also one of the flagship areas which is very much focused on multimodality or intermodality, and the other modes of transport are the integral part of our projects proposals. Flagship area 6 is delivering innovative rail services to revitalize capillary lines and regional rail services, including urban transport. So it's the area focusing on integrated all modes of transport into one transport chain, offering on the regional level and national level, and then later on European level, the services for benefits for the citizens. So multimodality and intermodality is already sufficiently present in each of those flagship areas, especially flagship areas 1 and 5. And at the end, I would like to focus in later, if there is a time enough, to introduce some concrete projects which are dealing with multimodality or intermodality, because there is quite a big list of the project, so huge list, and it's not time enough. But what we are even thinking about is to fulfill, finally delivering the single European rail area and single European data space for multimodal transport. So it's in principle the role and challenges of the Europe's Rail Partnership in research and innovation.
Thank you so much for that answer, Mr. Hautov. Coming back to you, to Mr. Caetano, about the fragmented ecosystem. Well, what is then the role of the policymakers and the industry players to actually have then a single, what do you call it, a single ecosystem that is less fragmented? How do we get them to a less fragmented ecosystem?
I would say that we have to design services of mobility.
Services of mobility.
And then you integrate the different modes. You develop interfaces which are very difficult to develop, either the physical or digital interfaces. It requires investment, huge amounts of investment, for the physical. That is a big challenge. Because for people to move from one mode to the other, it has to be a seamless change. You cannot make a huge effort in order to go from train to bus. Mr. Carol was saying that there's an interface that still takes 25 minutes to go from the railway station to the metro station. And that's the big challenge, how to promote these, how to develop these interfaces, who owns these interfaces, either the physical and digital, who puts the money in it. And this is not only about transport, the integration of transport modes, it's also the integration with the energy sector and with the IT sector, because the future of mobility is connected, is decarbonized. So we have to bring the energy sector into the discussion as well, and we have to bring the IT sector. So it's already difficult to have multimodality among the different modes of transport, because different cultures, legacy, but it's not sufficient. Multimodality requires also energy, because we have the needs for decarbonized transport. Where do we put the chargers? Where do we put the hydrogen plants? Who operates those? and the IT sector as well, because data has to be shared, data has to be organized, has to be deployed to people. And who develops those interfaces, who owns that? I mean, in terms of regulatory framework, we would push for that. We can mandate operators and oblige operators to share data, for instance, right? But then it's very difficult, because then they say, oh, I don't want to share my data with other operators. So I think
do we force them then to share the data? How do we make them then? Is that
we cannot, I think forcing is not, I would not say it's a good way of doing this. We have to do through dialogue and through cooperation. But the different stakeholders have to understand, in my view, that by being part of this integrated ecosystem, they will win. It will be a win-win situation, where you create new services, you create value, right? So, and everyone will share this new value, right? It's not like you operate one line and you don't share your clients with anyone. By developing these interfaces, by sharing information, by creating this mobility as a service, or services of mobility, whatever you want to call it, you are sharing clients, you are allowing added value services to be deployed, and I think everyone at the end will win, including us and the environment.
Thank you. Mr. Amditis, Professor Cayetano mentions here the financing, and you were into that as well. So is that, we start with that, and find, introduce and ask the energy sector, the telecom sector, the IT sector to join forces with us in order to find new services? Where do we start then? It's a dialogue, I agree, but somewhere, who puts the first stone down? Building stone.
Indeed. It's a dialogue, I agree, but sometimes, and allow me to say that, sometimes this dialogue takes forever. And there you really need to step in, and you really need to make things move forward. And I'm very happy with the logic that the market moves things. Yeah, fine. But this is not always the case. And there are areas where there is public interest. There are areas where you need to make sure that all your citizens have access, equity, and access and transparency and things like that. And there the market will not always be there, or there will be find no business cases to be there. So yes, dialogue, I fully agree. Because from dialogue you get a number of perspectives, you understand the problems, you understand the issues. But there is a point in time that you need to move forward. And this point of time, when it is reached, and when we continue on dialogue and everything, this is not always so democratic. Because sometimes when you really delay in taking decisions, then it's the opposite. You don't allow your citizens to get the benefits out of it. So in this respect, I really believe that public authorities, users, and by users I mean unions of citizens and cities in the regions which are users in this perspective, they need to demand, and they need to explain to all the stakeholders the need. And when you have that, then people start thinking differently on what to do. And I believe that this is a major thing that we still need to think in the European Union. Because there we have, of course, the difficulty that all the member states need to agree on things. And here I've mentioned a few examples of the difficulties that this creates. But at a point of time, we need to understand that we do that for our citizens. And when you do that for your citizens, then it's, you find different ways to understand financing, to understand investment, to understand rules, if you like. So yes, you cannot oblige people to provide their data, but there is a type of data which are public or are very important for safety or for access and for allowing people to get a similar, equal, transparent access. In this respect, these data do not belong to someone. These data are public, these data are for all of us. And for this data, I think we can do a step forward. So I believe that at the end of the day, if we answer the question why we do that, and what would be the benefits for our citizens and for our society, then we can rearrange our priorities, also for financing and for investment. And in this respect, I believe if we start thinking towards this direction, we will find solutions sooner than later.
Thank you for that wise answer. Then, Mrs. Marit Brandtzæg, with regards to what's been said and also about the data, and you mentioned that 90% of the freight is on the road, what is then your role as a road authority to actually ensure that there is a more intermodal connection and also taking into the consideration of the data handling and who kind of takes the first role? Is that a public authority role to start that discussion and ensuring that? Or are you enabling more the discussion? I know there were many questions in one. I'd like to kind of get started. I'm sorry about that.
And I think from the public authorities' perspective, that would be the first step would be trying to enable this discussion and trying to bring the partners together. But I agree at one point you have to say, okay, here we are, and then we have to use the regulatory tools. That could be a law or a directive or something, but that could also be standardization. Because standardization is a very different process for coming up with agreements. So I strongly believe in standardization processes. The best thing, of course, if we could do it worldwide, but a nice start would be European standardization. So I think it's very important when the company is in EU now points out standardization as a tool to achieve the goals. Then another perspective is that if we should be able to use our infrastructure, it has to be maintained and operated. So going into maintenance is also an important part for making this system function. And in the sense of collecting data, maintenance is also a very, very important, important processes. Because as road authorities, we are out on the road, or someone on behalf of us are out on the roads, not daily, I would not say that, but at least weekly. And then we collect a lot of data that is at a high value for the road authorities, but also we have a very high value if we share them. But then we have to share, we have to have data that can talk together. So again, this standardization and the interoperability between different ways of different data platforms. So I think that was some points.
Thank you. I will actually extend my invite as well to the audience and ask if someone has a question to the expert panels that we have here, so don't be shy. But I forgot to ask, actually a very good point, are there anyone from the energy or telecom sector or the IT sector here as well? I will not put you on the spot, so don't worry about that, but it's important that we collaborate across all sectors. It's very interesting to know if anyone from energy or telecom or IT sector is here, so please. Very well. One, good. Energy or telecom? IT, very good. Any questions? Please raise your hand. There we have one, sir, two. So start with the young gentleman on the front row. Please state your name and your question. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Daniel from the University in Aachen, Germany. I have a question regarding how to get people using all the multimodality solutions. I guess we have the techniques and we can apply them, but how do we make people use them? I mean, is it just about supply and demand, or do we need to force them? Because from my opinion, the people just want to get in their car, drive where they want to get out, and then be left alone. That's at least half of the people in Germany, at least. I like those new innovative multimodality solutions, but how do we get people to use them?
Very good question. Anyone wants to start with answering? Yes, Mr.
If I may, answer,
Yes.
most probably answer. Within the research innovation activities, we have a very big list of the projects which we are really finished or they are also ongoing. One of them is the shift to MaaS, shift to mobility as a service. Then cohesive projects of coherent setup and demonstration of integrated travel services. So that are innovative projects, right to rail, efficient combination of flexible scheduled transport services, coactive, go far, massive. All project has the really good results. And if we go to the implementation of the services, we need to focus on the benefits for the citizens. If the project results bring the benefit, then we can use it in real.
How do we make the benefits shown to
the benefits? Are not only that there is something cheaper or more smoother or facilitating the access, but benefits are that the people accept changes which are benefiting them. So it's not simply the reason I would like to be so free that I am riding at 7 o'clock in the morning with my car, but the offer is so good that I left my car at home and use the public transport because it's better for me. But I need to make the change, not the regulation, not the pressure of industry. The people need to change their mind together with the offer, of course, offer of the system.
Thank you, Mr. Aldov. And it is...
Yes, thank you. Just to add on that, I mean, why do we do multimodality? We do multimodality because we are supposed to offer something better to citizens, okay? So if you manage to offer really a faster, smoother, cheaper, and at the end of the day, of course, greener and everything else service, and we manage to explain that to our citizens, then I would be crazy if I'm not going to use this multimodality. I will give you the example from Athens, my city town. I'm using my car because I don't have every time all the modes I need in order to go to my work. And this is becoming terrible, really. I mean, traffic, pollution, cost of the fuel, and all these type of things. If I would really have the way to avoid this whole thing, then I would go for that. And if you add to that the need for educating our citizens and make them understand that having greener mobility, greener energy, all these type of things is better for them on the long term, better for our children, better for the next generation, they will add. But to start with, you really need to offer something to people.
And maybe you should also put it the other way around, because it's very important to understand what are people's needs, not telling people that this is better. And I think it's maybe the challenge is to try to construct something that is close to the dream of a car travel. Because we have a dream of what it is like using the car, but the reality is what you told. You are stuck in somewhere on your way. So, but if you come up with something that is close to the dream of using your own car, maybe we succeed.
Thank you.
Well, just to add that I don't think we will have a fundamental change in the transport sector. So we have these discussions, but we are talking about incremental changes. There will be no such thing as a fundamental change unless we invent Italian transport. So the thing is, how can we accelerate these incremental changes to make a difference? And I'm very skeptical, to be honest, because everyone drives their cars. That's difficult in Lisbon it's difficult to take the bus because the bus competes with the cars at the surface. So this will be always difficult. Now, we might think, well, what if we start charging in function of carbon emissions, for instance? But then maybe this will not be good in terms of as an equity policy, because people that are poor, live further away from the centers, have less transport, public transport offers, so they rely on their cars. In Lisbon, we told that old cars cannot drive within the center limits, but that people that have old cars, that usually are the poorest, drive their cars to the center to see the Christmas lights, right? Whether everyone during Christmas drives their cars there. So just to finish by saying that carbon will play a big role in terms of pricing in the future. I can see that happening because the transport sector is the only sector in Europe that hasn't decreased their carbon emissions in the past 30 years. It's the only one. All the others have decreased their carbon emissions except transport, which actually has increased by 30%. So in order to revert these, we have to have a fundamental change, and I don't think that will happen so quickly.
I see, I'm really sorry, but the time, it's red, it's very red here. It's actually so red, I have to really, but what my important final note is that this is where we start the discussion. So I urge you all, and I really, Mr. Rector's words as well, we need to start, we need to work, we need to also talk with your kind of feelings of it's not going to happen really soon, but it will happen. How do we do it? So I want the telecom, I want the IT, I want the energy sector, I want air, sea, land, and rail work together in order to continue this discussion. And I thank our great expert panelists, and I thank Mr. Reuters for your keynote. And I thank you, your audience, for being such a good sport, and continue the discussion. Thank you.